Today is day 4 of College and Career Week, and we are learning about careers in education, military, law, and the government. And we have a lot of guest speakers for today. So we have split today's video into 2 parts, and this will be part 1, where we cover law, military, and government. Part 2 will be careers in education. So for part 1, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker. This is Miss Skidmore. She's an attorney.
Hey guys, we're here with Miss Skidmore today, and I'm going to ask her some questions. So, Miss Skidmore, what is your name and your job?
Well, my name is Kif Skidmore, and I am an attorney. I work at a law firm called Stahl, Keenan, and Ogden.
Okay. Now, Miss Skidmore, how long have you been an attorney?
Since 2002, so almost 18 years.
That's a very long time. Number 3, what is the most rewarding thing about your job?
The most rewarding thing about my job is that I get to help people solve problems that are very difficult to solve.
Okay. Number 4, what is the most challenging thing about your job?
Probably the most challenging thing about my job is that it's stressful. Do you know how when you get nervous before you have to take a test?
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel that way. I feel that way sometimes when I have to go in front of a judge or to court. And I always feel a little bit nervous that I might mess something up.
Oh, I've been there. Well, number 5, what level of education do you need to do your job?
Well, you have to get a high school diploma. So you have to finish high school or get your GED. And then you go to college, which usually takes about 4 years. And then you get what's called a Juris Doctor degree, which is 3 years of law school.
Oh, that is very interesting. Now, tell us about your training and your job for number 6.
Okay, so my training really kind of began at a young age. I went to visit my uncle when I was 13 years old, and I worked in his law firm. So I got to see what attorneys did at a very young age. And then other training consisted of during my law school years in the summer, I would work for the law firms and kind of practice being an attorney.
Oh, now, number 7, what certification do you have to do your job with?
In order to be a lawyer, you have to have what's called a law license. And you get that from the Kentucky Bar Association. And you have to take a very difficult test. And after you take this test, if you pass it, then the Kentucky Supreme Court grants you a license to practice law in the state.
Number 8, what advice do you have for the students watching at home?
Well, the most important thing about if you were to choose to be a lawyer or anything else is to work really, really hard. It helps to be smart, but hard work is what really pays off. And if somebody tells you that you can't be a lawyer or can't be anything else that you want to be, you just keep working hard and you do it.
Okay. Now, number 8, number 9. Has the coronavirus pandemic changed the way you do your job?
Oh, it certainly has changed the way that I do my job. I used to, before the pandemic started, work in a great big building downtown, as you know. I would drop you off at school, and then I would go on downtown and work in this tall building every day where my office is. And now, my office, as you know, is where?
In your closet and your bedroom.
Yes, and so that's very different. And now when I have meetings with people, I will have to have meetings with them over the phone rather than in person. So that's very different too.
Now, for number 10, Ms. Skidmore, I'm pretty sure we're on number 10. Has your idea as a lawyer changed since you were a kid or since you first got the image of being a lawyer?
Yes, it's very much changed. I wanted to be a lawyer because I read a book called, do you remember what it was called?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, it was a wonderful book, and you will read that book someday. And I wanted to be like Atticus Finch, but I'm really nothing like Atticus Finch, because what I do, instead of defending people in prosecutions and trying to keep them from going to jail, is I work for doctors and employers, people who give people jobs, and I have to read a lot of records and have to learn a lot about what other people do, so I become an expert in all kinds of different areas so that I can help make arguments and help people that work in those areas solve their problems.
That is very interesting. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skidmore, for telling us all about your job as an attorney. Our next guest today is my cousin. His name is Corey Helton, and he has served in the U.S. Marines. I think he did a great job with his video.
Hello, my name is Corey Helton. The career field I'm going to be discussing is the military, specifically the United States Marine Corps. I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I served 5 years active duty, 3 years inactive ready reserve. The most rewarding thing is definitely having the title of a United States Marine, being able to wear this uniform. It represents that I'm something bigger than myself. I've been all over the country. I've been all over the world. I've worked with F-18s. I've done all kinds of training. I've done a training that has helped me in everyday life. Another huge rewarding thing is the friendship that you'll have in there. The men and women that I served with in the 5 years that I was active duty, I'm still in contact with them today. I still talk to them quite often, and they're like family to me. And we work together so much, and we go through a lot of struggles, so we become really close. That's a huge reward about being here. Another reward would be I worked on F-18s, and I got to work around them. An F-18 is, if you know what the Blue Angels are, they're the same aircraft, besides one they're blue and ours is gray. And we didn't put on shows. Our aircraft, we would deploy with them and do combative missions. The most challenging thing about the job up front would be boot camp. When you get to boot camp, they pretty much right out the gate, they give you a uniform. You turn in the clothes that you showed up with. They put those in storage. Now you're in a green uniform, and they shave your head, and you pretty much start your training. Some pretty vigorous training. You learn in low crawls, your movement under fire, you're carrying supplies for miles. You rappel off of a big wall to learn how to rappel down buildings. They have a helo landing gear, and you rappel off of that. You go through a gas chamber. When you get in the gas chamber, they want you to take your mask off, and they make you leave it off long enough that you do have to breathe. The gas is not dangerous to you, but it does burn. It makes you cough, and they want to train you how to put that mask back on, clear it, and be able to start breathing fresh air again. So those are really challenging things. Once you get through boot camp and you earn that title, and you go into your job field, each and every job is going to have different training inside of that, and that's also challenging. While you're in, you have to keep your uniforms. You have a couple different uniforms. This one right here is my dress blues for a fancier ceremony like a Marine Corps ball, which is actually the Marine Corps birthday. When the Marine Corps became the United States Marine Corps, we celebrate that day. That's a higher end ceremony, so we would wear our dress blues. If I was on a traveling orders or standing duty on base or something of that nature, I would wear my service uniform, and that's what this one's called. The challenging part about that is all these uniforms, and there's a few others, they have to be in perfect shape. They have to be ironed, they have to be pressed, they have to be clean, the buttons have to be shiny. The mantles have to be shiny, they have to be mounted correctly. So on top of your job, you have to make sure that's squared away. You gotta have a fresh haircut. You can't grow scrubble like this. You have to shave every day. On top of your job. Yet again, those individual things ain't very challenging, but while you're trying to do those and keep up with your training in your job field and do your job, it can get a little bit challenging, but it's definitely all worth it. The level of education that you need would be a high school education. You can go pretty much straight out of high school into, while you're in the Marine Corps, you can continue to further your education, and that they actually will cover that. They will pay for your college while you attend a college. You can do online classes and still do the job that you have while you're in the military and better yourself, and then one day you can become an officer that needed that college education. My job, I was an F-18 mechanic, so I worked on the engines, tires, fuel cells. We would control the aircraft when the pilot was coming in. They can't really see. They have a real long wingspan, so we would help guide them around corners. We would check the aircraft after the pilot gets in it. They would move the flight surfaces around, and we'd make sure we seen everything move the way it's supposed to. Make sure there wasn't no leaks. When he started it, there wasn't no fire or anything like that, and we'd make sure the aircraft was safe for flight. We even go on the fly line where the aircraft sit, where they park. You have to have some training, so that way you know the dangers of being out there. You have to know that you have to wear steel-toe boots. You have to wear ear muffs, so because the aircrafts are really loud. You have to wear eye protection if the aircraft's running. Where to go, where you can go, and where you can't go. And it just makes sure that you stay safe. And then each thing that you do, the more difficult the maintenance job is on the aircraft, the higher of skill that you need. So the higher certificate or qualification that you'll get, all the way up to quality assurance, which is somebody that makes sure that everything that's being done is done right, it's done by the book, and it's done in a very safe manner. And in starting aircraft, I'd sit in the cockpit and I'd actually start an aircraft, and I would check and make sure that the piece that we replaced or the part that we replaced is actually functioning correctly. The advice that I have for students that may be interested in choosing the military as a career field, I can't really speak for the other branches as much, but the Marine Corps I can. One of the biggest things is stay out of trouble. If you get in trouble while you're in school, as you go through your grades in school, if you start getting in trouble, it's going to be really hard to get into the military because they do look at all that stuff. So stay out of trouble. The other big thing would be your grades. Keep your grades up. If your grades are up, that means you're learning. If you're learning, you have to take an ASVAB before you get in the military. The ASVAB test will decide which jobs you can do inside the military. It has, puzzle solving, mechanics, mathematics, spelling, stuff like that, all broke down into this one test. And then when you test out on it, they break it down. And if you're really high in mechanics, then they'll suggest that you do a job in mechanics. If you're really good in mathematics, you might do a job that has to do with crunching in numbers into a computer to figure out how far this aircraft can fly before it runs out of fuel. So pay attention in school, get really good grades. I understand, the school can be a little boring at times, but trust me, if you're going to go into the military field, you definitely want that schooling. You want to know that stuff when you get in there, because it'll help you get a better job. If you take that ASVAB, you go to a recruiting office, and you take that score in there, or they'll make you take another test, and you score really high on it. The recruiting office, the Marine there, will set out this book, and inside this book is all these different career fields within the United States Marine Corps. And if you scored high on that because you did good in school and you had good grades, so you're gonna score high on that, you'll have the pick of the litter. You'll be able to pick any job you want. Inside the military, you can be a cook, you can be a pilot, you can be an aircraft mechanic, you can be a vehicle mechanic. They're called Motor T. They work on trucks and Humvees and tanks and stuff like that. You can be an infantry before it runs out of fuel. So pay attention in school, get really good grades. I understand, the school can be a little boring at times, but trust me, if you're going to go into the military field, you definitely want that schooling. You want to know that stuff when you get in there, because it'll help you get a better job. If you take that ASVAB, you go to a recruiting office, and you take that score in there, or they'll make you take another test, and you score really high on it. The recruiting office, the Marine there, will set out this book, and inside this book is all these different career fields within the United States Marine Corps. And if you scored high on that because you did good in school and you had good grades, so you're gonna score high on that, you'll have the pick of the litter. You'll be able to pick any job you want. Inside the military, you can be a cook, you can be a pilot, you can be an aircraft mechanic, you can be a vehicle mechanic. They're called Motor T. They work on trucks and Humvees and tanks and stuff like that. You can be an infantryman. You can be, communications. You can be OPSEC, which is operational management. So they're planning out a whole movement. There's so many jobs that you can go in there, and if you score really good on that ASVAB, then you can pick all those jobs, and the root of all that is doing really good in school. So I think that would be the number one thing, that and staying out of trouble. That's about it. Right.
Thank you, Corey, for sharing with all of my students about your career as a Marine. And now we're going to hear from another branch of the military, the U.S. Air Force. This is Mason Green.
Hi, Eastern Elementary students. I'm Tech Sergeant Mason Green of the United States Air Force, and I'm a flying crew chief on the C-17 Globemaster III. My job is to deliver cargo and people all over the world for the purpose of wartime and humanitarian relief. I've been in my career field for over 11 years now. The most rewarding part of my job is the impact it has on others. I get to help people from all over the world when no one else can. The most challenging part of my job is being away from home. I can be gone from 3 days to 6 months at any moment's notice. For my job, you need at least an applied science degree. I received mine from Air University through the Air Force when I came in. You also need at least 3 years experience working on an airplane, which the Air Force also gave me as well. To be in the Air Force, you have to be very well-rounded, meaning you have to study really hard and get good grades in school, and you also have to be very physically fit. So the best advice I have for anyone wanting to be in the Air Force is to just work hard at everything you do. The coronavirus has changed our job a lot, mostly just the location and the kind of work we're doing. We're really used to humanitarian relief. We've worked with the Ebola crisis before in Africa, and this is a little bit different because it's more in homestead. So right now, our government, they needed as many coronavirus testing kits as they could get. And there's a company in Italy who had over 1 million of these kits. And we needed a way to get all 1 million of these kits to the United States as quickly as possible. And that's where I come in. We delivered over 1 million test kits in 2 flights from Italy to the United States. We can actually transform our airplane into a flying hospital. So during this time of the coronavirus, there are lots of people stranded out in certain islands around the world that a normal aircraft couldn't get to them and care for them in the immediate amount of time that we have to. The best part of my job is the responsibility of knowing that there's people out there that are always in need, and when they really need help and we need to help them as quick as possible and as safely as possible, you call the Air Force.
Have you ever thought about being a police officer or working for the sheriff's office? Let's hear what that's like.
All right. I'm Sergeant Joshua Bedson with the Scott County Sheriff's Office. I'm a sergeant on day shift patrol. Here I'm also our K-9 handler and our assistant SWAT commander for our special response team. I've been in this career field for almost 13 years now. I've been in a sworn position as a deputy for 11 years. Been in a supervisory position for a couple years. Prior to the sworn position, I dispatched and worked court security in Fayette County. The most rewarding things about this job for me would be helping people. It's not all about arrests. Sometimes it's great to just be able to help somebody, whether they're a broken down motorist or children in need or people like that, or seeing people change over the course of your career into becoming better people and contributing to society. So that's the most rewarding part of this job for me. Some of the most challenging things about this job can be dealing with the court system, trying to get things done. We often encounter the same people over and over again, and sometimes it can be frustrating to not see them get the help they need or the rehabilitation needed to help the community also. If you want to do something in this profession, as far as education level for a deputy sheriff or a police officer with like Georgetown Police Department, you would need either a GED or a high school diploma. If you're looking to do a little more, a lot of agencies anymore are asking for an associate's degree or applying programs where if you go through the academy you get an associate's degree. Most of your federal agencies are looking for a bachelor's degree, so a career in criminal justice through a program at EKU or something like that would be a good idea or good suggestion to help you start in this career, especially if you want to advance. The higher up in rank you go, they're looking for more education, possibly even a master's degree if you get to lieutenant, chief deputy, assistant chief, or sheriff or chief, stuff like that. As far as the training and things that we go through personally, each deputy has to go through now it's a 20-week course. It ends up being 700 plus hours of basic training through the Department of Criminal Justice Training, and that's at the EKU campus in Richmond, Kentucky. The state police and Lexington and Louisville all have their own academies, though. Theirs are a little different. Aside from that, if you wanted to get into this career field and say you wanted to start in dispatching like I did, it's a 4-week class for Dispatch Academy, or the court security class is 2 weeks, I believe. And that's all done at the Department of Criminal Justice Training. You end up staying up there, except on the weekends, and then you get to come home and visit your family and things like that. You can continue to build on those certifications too throughout this time. I've been through several classes just since my career began. I've been through our basic SWAT programs. I've been through canine handling. If you become a supervisor, there's an Academy of Police Supervision. There's also several programs based on different niches in law enforcement, like becoming a detective or a criminal investigator, or dealing with traffic or community relations, online investigation, social media, sexual assaults, robbery, homicide, things like that. If you're interested in applying and joining a police department or something like that, I would suggest going down and introducing yourself to your local police chief, sheriff. Some of these programs have explorer programs for kids in high school. Some of them also will allow ride-alongs for people over 18. It's just something each department differs on. You have to go and ask. You could also ask to sit in on a Citizens Police Academy, which some places offer. It'll teach you a lot more about how things are done within the police department or the sheriff's office. They also usually end up doing tours of the jail and things like that. You can't do this job until you're 21 as a sworn law enforcement officer. So if you're really interested, I would suggest maybe doing a criminal justice degree or something like that in a higher education, or maybe jump into it and start trying to dispatch if you can get on something like that way. This profession can change often. Policy changes all the time based on case law and courts. Right now, we're dealing with the big issue with the COVID-19 pandemic. It really hasn't changed a whole lot for us. We are practicing some extra precautions with personal protective equipment. We always typically come into contact with some things where we want to have gloves on and different protection for our feet or bodies and everything like that. This has kind of enhanced the use of a mask, which I think everybody has done, but we take those extra precautions with everybody now for this virus just to make sure it doesn't spread to us, our loved ones, or the community.